Girls and boys, to episode 26 of Stir Crazy, The Workers Strike Back, brought to you by the Real News Network. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Coming up on today's show, gang, we're going to take you to scenes all around the world and around the country from different actions and protests on this very somber day, May Day, as the globe is experiencing a pandemic. Workers are under more pressure than ever before and are standing up demanding that they get not only what they deserve, but what they need to survive. So we're going to be checking in really from a variety of places from across the country, across the globe. I mean, there's a lot of issues being marched upon today that includes not only workers' rights, but immigrants' rights. There are rent strike protests happening today. There are recovery for all, making sure that the recovery from the pandemic and the shutdown and everything that's happened around it is equal, that all groups, all members of this community, of this society are able to have a just recovery. It's so important. So listen up, gang. We want you to be in the conversation as well. As always, get on down there in the comments, hop in the chat, because we know you definitely have some things to say. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. But also right now, it's time to introduce our fantastic panel, gang. We have a really great collection of folks from around the country to talk to us, including Chris Smalls. You probably have seen him here on The Real News. You've seen him interviewed on a variety of different outlets. He was forced out by Amazon. He has been extremely active and extremely vocal in speaking up about how Amazon workers are not being properly protected at work. They are not being compensated, commensurate to the level of risk they are taking by being an essential frontline worker during a pandemic. We are very excited to speak to Chris. Also, Danny Spitzberg, he is from the Tech Workers Coalition, joining us today from Oakland, California. Vanessa Bain is from the Gig Workers Collective, joining us from Menlo Park, and we appreciate you all being here on Stir Crazy on The Real News on this May Day. So thank you guys so much for being here.
We're happy to be here.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Well, gang, as we look around the country and look around the world about what, the different actions and protests that are happening today, we're actually going to start in Baltimore. Our own Jessel Noor was out in East Baltimore covering the protests of cafeteria workers at Johns Hopkins University. Let's take a look.
An essential worker.
Ali Pierre
Is an essential worker.
Albert Williams
Is an essential worker.
Alma Lee
Is an essential worker.
Alma Vida Kichon
Is an essential worker.
Alonzo Mitchell
So what's happening today? Workers at the prestigious Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore staged a socially distanced protest calling on the university to pay the 190 laid off cafeteria workers the 4 weeks pay that they were promised. Now, the workers say that they were promised 4 weeks pay 1 month ago, but have not received any assistance from the university. And some said that they are behind their unemployment tax payments and therefore ineligible for unemployment benefits. Now, many of these workers say that they have not yet received their stimulus checks, putting them under tremendous financial pressure. Now, Hopkins has been on the forefront of this global response to the pandemic. They are projecting a $100 million loss for fiscal year 2020 due to the COVID-19 outbreak. But yet, Johns Hopkins University is sitting on an endowment that was worth approximately $6 billion in 2019, and they can't pay these cafeteria workers. Now, the workers are represented by the union Unite Here Local 7. This is a predominantly African American union in a predominantly Black city, which has been disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus pandemic after a century of public policy neglect and racist practices that have been enacted against this community in this city for a very long time. Chris, I want to start with you because, first of all, I want to ask how your day has gone so far today, and tell to us about Amazon workers. And this has been talked about really for several weeks. This planned protest and walkout. We know some Amazon workers out in Minnesota, I think it was Shakopee, they walked out on the job earlier this week. So talk to us about your comrades at Amazon.
Absolutely. Today was historical. I want to shout out one of my family members that's actually here today. Hey, Vanessa.
What's
Vanessa
up,
was a
Chris?
part of. She's a part of this family that formed this alliance. Me and Vanessa, we came together throughout the course of the past weeks, and we had conference calls to form this alliance that took place. And today we made history. I'm exhausted, but I'm motivated more than everything. It's empowering to see what's going on around the country today. It's also a sad situation at the same time. People are underpaid, are not paid at all, unprotected. These companies, these CEOs, these billionaires, these universities are taking advantage of the working class people, and enough is enough. And today is a display of how we're going to take the power back. And I've been out all morning. I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning, interviewing and protesting, standing up for this cause right here. And even though I may be exhausted, it's bigger than me. And I know this moment in time is very, very important. So I'm happy to be here with you guys. I'm happy to share the story on behalf of Amazon workers all across the nation, all across the globe. Today we stand together in solidarity to make sure that this never happens again for future generations.
Vanessa, you're out in California representing the Gig Workers Collective. We know Instacart was among the workers, the group of workers who was walking out on the job, protesting today. Talk to us about the unique challenges posed and faced by gig workers and what demands they are making of these big corporations that have not yet been met.
Yeah. So Instacart and Shipt are both gig companies. Both of them function in the capacity of employers that misclassify their workforce, right? And so we're in a unique position where we can't work because we don't have access to proper PPE. We don't have access to hazard pay. We have no meaningful sick pay policies. But we're also being disqualified or improperly qualified for state insurance programs because our employers don't pay into that system. The state of California doesn't have any idea how much money I make, and it doesn't have any idea how much money millions of us make because of our improper classification. But we're in the hotbed of this virus. We're in grocery stores, we're in warehouses, and it's a situation where our lives are on the line. And the companies that we work for have failed to meaningfully protect us. So workers have had to take matters into their own hands.
And we know that, both with Instacart and Amazon have both of these companies have seen a tremendous spike in demand for their products and for their services because so many people are forced to stay at home due to the pandemic. So what has that how has that impacted the Instacart workforce, Vanessa, where we know that they were saying that they wanted to hire, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 new drivers, but at the same time, they weren't protecting the drivers that they already had employed.
Right. It's a worst case scenario, unfortunately, especially with Instacart, also with Shipt, when it comes to gig work in the gig economy in a pandemic. We are in high demand right now. Our service is deemed essential. Customers are ordering with a false sense of security that somehow we're being protected, which mitigates their risks and contracting their risks out to us. Unfortunately, the reality is that many, if not most, of all workers are working without any meaningful protection, without masks, without gloves, without hand sanitizer. And when we get sick, our communities get sick. And the whole ecosystem of the grocery world is going to be impacted and affected beyond, ourselves and our communities in general. We're bringing those risks to a customer's door. Same with Amazon. When warehouse workers are getting sick, the products that they're picking and they're packing aren't protected, and those risks are again coming straight to a customer's door. So I think it offers a full sense of security to our customers customers and to the general public that this is a safer alternative. But if those risks are, delivered to your door, then that's not mitigating anything, right? That's in fact potentially putting people in harm's way by giving them that false sense of security.
Danny Spitzberg is joining us today from Oakland, California, representing the Tech Workers Collective. Danny, now for people who may not be familiar with the labor struggles of the tech world, can you give us an idea of the type of workers' demands that tech workers make of their companies that have not yet been met either?
Yeah, thanks for laying it down like that. I think for those not familiar with Tech Workers Coalition, it's mostly office workers, right? And I think Chris and Vanessa have spoken, and Chris put out a video a couple of days ago that describe what are also essentially in some way tech workers. So I'll defer to them for the most part on the demands, right? Especially since you all wrote them up and have them documented. But you can also appreciate, I think, or if you were just recently laid off from Yelp, for example, right? You do customer service or you do some design work for that company. They let 1,100 people off the other week. And I think they don't quite have, as those staff, a lot of demands as such, but I think they can start to come around and follow some of the leadership of folks like Vanessa and Chris and folks that are other parts of the tech industry at large, right? Amazon owns Whole Foods now, and you walk into Whole Foods and it's not that different than an Amazon warehouse in terms of its logistics, just looks a little different and can kind of be a little more of a customer in there. But again, I'll just say that tech workers showing up in support of some of the folks who are organizing one another and trying to be there with you all in a relationship. That's how the perspective looks. I think at least it's starting to move that way.
Okay, gang. So, not only are workers hitting the streets today, socially distancing in many instances to make sure that everyone remains safe, but they are asking the public, asking customers to take action themselves. And let's put that up there because when we talk about standing with workers who are striking, this is what this means. And we have a little graphic here. I'm going to read it off to you. It's happening today, May Day, and we're calling for a boycott. Why? Because there are record profits, which equals workers deserve better. And what the workers are asking of the public is, how can you help? Don't buy anything on May 1st, okay? Walmart, Amazon, FedEx, Whole Foods, Target, Shipt, Instacart. The workers are asking for hazard pay, no test required for paid sick leave, better protective equipment, better sanitary procedures, immediate information on infected coworkers, immediate shutdown of infected locations. And Chris Smalls, this goes directly to the heart of why you were speaking out publicly against Amazon. And part of the reason why they ended up dismissing you is because they clearly retaliated against you for speaking up on behalf of your coworkers. But obviously you had concerns because people where you work had grown sick and the company was not being forthcoming. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. 30 days ago, exactly 30 days ago, I put my career on the line. I've been with the company since 2015. And when I noticed the company has dropped its ball on protecting its workers and its employees, I stood up. I took a stance. I put my career on the line to save the lives of my former employees, my former colleagues, my extended family. I felt like it was the right thing to do. I still feel that way today. Today, I even feel more empowered to have done what I've done because look what we formed. This alliance that you just showed, Vanessa and Danny, they all a part of it. Today, we took a stance together to take the power back from these CEOs that have been thriving during the pandemic, thriving off of blood money, the expense of human lives. People have passed away. I think Danny is up in Oakland. Somebody just died in Oakland and Amazon 2 days ago. We lost a member of our working class because he went to work. That is inhumane to me. That's insanity. To have somebody go to work to try to provide for their family, to have a decent life and put his health on the line, something he didn't ask to do, and pass away. That is just sad and disheartening. That's what I tried to prevent from happening. And these CEOs disregarded that, and they still do to this day. So we're asking for, this is a cry for help. We're asking everybody, consumers all around the world, to stand with us and support us. We want to make sure our families are safe, our communities are safe, and humanity is preserved at the end of the day. And this is why we're fighting and we're mobilizing, and we're going to continue to do just that until something positive comes out of this situation.
Danny, how are we able to measure the financial impact of such boycotts? I don't expect Walmart to be forthcoming and saying, hey, yeah, on May Day, our sales took a 6% hit, because that's just not how they would operate. But clearly, there are a number of people that are standing with workers, not just on this May Day, but May Days in the past. How are you able to tell how much impact or damage that is causing to these companies' bottom lines, at least for this one day?
There's a lot of chain reactions. So there's a lot of counting up all the costs. Obviously, the human life cost you can't count, right? So the boycott's able to slow some of that down. There's a kind of complicated question. I just want to point in one item, which is I've seen Vanessa and a lot of the other folks in the Bay Area highlight for Instacart how they are starting to respond to negative pressure by saying everything's fine, no big deal, right? The boycotts, these strikes, they're not really hurting us, which is funny for them to actually give voice to it. So you can tell that they're costing something internally. And also something a little maybe complicated with the power of the industry to keep tech workers is a lot of folks either getting laid off or quitting right now are harder to get back, right? Who do office work, who do programming or design or management. And if there's a cost to these companies being able to hold a strong position, right? And if you can measure it on their part, I think that's a gain on our part, right? That these folks are struggling a lot. In the past, I'll just highlight one last thing, which is there were some projects that I'm not going to speak to, military contracts that I wasn't part of, that have been dropped from some companies. That's a huge cost. We're talking billions. And that was partly a boycott inspired, but it was really internal action amongst some of the workers saying, we don't want to be part of this, and we're going to collectively say, we're not working on it.
Vanessa, we know that some companies across different industries have offered small amounts of additional compensation for their workers to remain on the job during the pandemic. Yesterday on our program, we saw a video from Texas, from the Quality Sausage meat processing plant, where 2 workers had died from COVID. I think over 50 people had been confirmed positive for the COVID-19 infection. And part of what the company did was to offer them a $1,000 bonus. I believe like Target offered some of its associates like a $2 an hour raise, while I guess nice, it gets eaten up by taxes for the most part, and is not, does not meet the amount of risk that workers and associates are taking on. So from your perspective as a gig employee, what is the number? What is the amount that workers deserve in order to continue the essential functions that they're doing right now?
Yeah, I think the baseline where we should be, even outside of the context of this pandemic, is that especially as frontline workers, especially as essential workers, we need to be making livable wages, which means that we need to be able to take care of our families off of one job. We need to be able to pay our rent off of one job. We need to be able to pay our bills off of one job. I think almost none of us, at least, in terms of like, warehouse workers, gig workers, et cetera, almost none of us are in that position right now. And we work for some of the richest companies in the world, right? So when we're talking about what that needs to look like in a pandemic, it's at least 150% of whatever that livable wage is, which is more likely than not 200+% of what we're actually earning right now. We being deemed essential, being deemed a hero is like it has no substance, right? It has no substance unless we're treated like we're essential. But right now, essential is a euphemism for disposable. And that's the real situation. I don't feel respected. I don't feel appreciated. I don't feel valued. I had to stop working 6 weeks ago because I couldn't continue to take the risk of going out into a grocery store without proper protection. And to this day, Instacart has failed to provide proper protection, proper equipment, hazard pay, even sick pay should a worker become sick. Those are systemic failures. And unfortunately, these things have existed before the pandemic, and they'll continue to exist after the pandemic. But we need to be chipping away at getting those concessions, not just from companies, but getting some of that codified into law, right? Because there should be a set and standard way that workers are paid if they're risking their lives in the course of their work, right? And there should be a set and standard way that workers are paid and protected during times of crisis. And that shouldn't be left up to the discretion of individual companies. You know, what the boss gives you, the boss can take away. So we need laws, we need real codified protections, and consistent application so that we don't have to address these grievances on a company by company grievance, or on a company by company basis, right? We need to have the same standard for Amazon that we have for Instacart. We need to have the same standard for Instacart that we have for Target. We need to have the same standard for all of these workers to know that, one, they're protected, two, that they're working in safe conditions, or the safest possible conditions, that three, that their pay is enhanced proportionate to the risk that they're taking on. And we also need to have a meaningful pay policy, right? A sick pay policy should we become sick. I don't even have the right to minimum wage as a gig worker. And so, health insurance and all these other hosts of things that we need to be able to have access to do our job safely, many of us are deprived of. And there's a whole host of things that we need. But when it comes to pay, we need to be making substantially more than what we're making right now. There are Instacart workers that are out there working during a pandemic that aren't even earning minimum wage right now. And that's egregious. And that's a bit.
Gang, so I wanted to toss something out to you, because we do have some other video that we want to look at some of the protests around the world. But I wanted to ask you all a policy question. Yesterday on our program, we had a clip from Senator Mitch McConnell, a Republican from Kentucky, and he said explicitly that Congress, at least through the Senate, won't help the House or help Democrats authorize additional federal aid to the states unless it's codified in the bill that there will be liability protections in place for businesses, so that when businesses reopen and the economy reopens, business owners cannot be sued by their employees if they somehow become sick with COVID and, get sick and God forbid die. I wanted to get y'all's take on that, because we know that the Congress in general has not really been a friend to workers. They are definitely a friend to the elites and to the ruling class, and don't really have workers' interests at heart. And this is not news to anyone. But when you hear the Senate Majority Leader say, the bank strings are tied, they're cut off. The states won't get any additional money unless they put in these guaranteed protections for corporations that employees can't sue them. Chris, I want to start with you, because I'm pretty sure that Amazon could be headed in that direction with people who have gotten sick due to improper cleaning, not proper social distancing guidelines, et cetera. What are your thoughts about that's coming from the Senate?
That's capitalism at its finest. That's plain and simple. It's disgraceful. The simple fact that this government runs this country. It's a shame. They basically saying the hell with the people. We all about the economy. That's why they're trying to open it back up right now. None of us have been tested. They rather open the economy up to save the market, putting profits above people, to make sure these billionaires, these businesses are bailed out They love bailing them out. The hell with us. You know, we could go on and on about it. We all know what's going on here. It's plain and simple, blind, right in front of us. And this is exactly why me, Vanessa, Danny, come together to take this power back now. Enough is enough. You know, it's sick. It makes me sick every time I even turn on the TV and even watch them speak about things like this. It's sad situation that we live in, and I don't want to raise my children in this type of society. So I get up every day motivated to try to fight for a better future. And you know, I can, like I said, I can go on and on about Mitch McConnell and what he's done in the past and what he's trying to do now. It's ridiculous, and that's all I'm gonna say about it. You know, it's ridiculous. It's insanity. It's inhumane. Enough is enough. We got to stop this now. The time is now. This pandemic exposed everything as far as this country. Expose how these businesses really operate. Expose how something that we already knew. Capitalism, the 1%ers, they run the world. And we are replaceable. We are expendable. And like Vanessa said, disposable. They don't care about us. But it's time to fight back. And that's what we're doing today. We're fighting back. And it may be, you know, a slow process, but it's a start. And we're not going to stop. It's a revolution.
Danny, what's your take on Mitch McConnell's position as it relates to reopening businesses back so long as there are protections in place for the businesses? The workers, not so much.
It sounds like testing the water for give an inch, take a mile policy. You know, how far can we push people to just shut up and take what we deal with? You know, deal them. I worry about what it takes. I mean, I'll be real. The response that we can have, you know, myself, Chris, and Vanessa, and so many other people alongside us, has got to be proportional or more, you know, to something so wholesale bad to that, you know. And when you talk about the demands that are being made and the pressure that can be put on, you know, Mitch McConnell and all the other folks down the line who would love to see that change work so that, you know, companies are protected legally with people not protected physically. I guess being in, you know, we only have so much time, but we need to take some time to really think creatively and to really build relationships so we can actually come up with what it takes, you know, to fight back.
Yeah, gang. So speaking of fighting back, I wanted to take us around the world and look at some quick pictures of some of the protests that are happening globally. And I think we're going to start off in Japan, where this protest is happening outside of the Ministry of Health, their offices there. Now, the Japanese, at least this particular group, is upset about the lack of governmental response from their perspective. Gosh, I don't even know what they would say about our government's response, but they're upset about employment compensation not being fully funded as a result of the shutdown. Obviously, the Tokyo Olympics have been postponed. That is having an economic impact on the Japanese folks there. They're also complaining about lack of adequate health care as it comes to the coronavirus pandemic and the amount of places that are available for people to get tested. So, you know, these protests involve workers, but obviously just advocating for human rights across the board. And as we take a look, I think we're going to Greece. As we see the protesters out there in Greece, you see this socially distanced protest with people raising their fists in the air. Now, we know in Greece, they have been protesting for, I think, long time, decade plus, against austerity measures. We know Greece was hit hardest during the Great Recession of 08, 09, had to deal with a lot of a lot of shit basically from the European Union as it related to the Greek economy, rescuing the Greek economy, bailing out the Greek economy. The people always said that they deserve more, they want more, and the Greek people have never ever hesitated to get out in the streets and advocate for what they believe in. I also want to take a quick peek here domestically. We saw Baltimore. Our correspondent Jessel Noor was out there at Johns Hopkins University with the cafeteria workers. But in Grand Rapids, Michigan, there was a protest there advocating on behalf of rights of immigrants. Specifically, in Michigan, this group was there to say that immigrants deserve access to legal driver's licenses and to federal and state benefits. And this particular protester's comment really got my attention because he explained why he specifically was out there for that protest. Let's hear from him.
I wanted to, partly I wanted to shame other white people into behaving in the moral upstanding way that a lot of people think that they do. I want them to, I want other people like me to know that our position of privilege comes with the responsibility to help those who need help.
And that video was courtesy of WOOD TV in Michigan. Vanessa, you know, these movements are converging. And as Chris said, you know, the pandemic has laid all this bare, all the different faults and cracks and literally chasms within our social safety net, or lack thereof, that we don't really have a good social safety net. But I wanted to talk about how and why it is important, even for people who are struggling right now, to acknowledge the place that racial privilege has, and why it is important to stand with people who are struggling like yourself, but also more marginalized than you.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, struggle is all we got, right? We gotta invest in building that out and building the power around it. And in response to it. But, you know, there are people that obviously are disproportionately impacted right now. It's Black and brown folks, it's immigrant folks, it's you know, it's single parents, it's women. So these are people who obviously have already, you know, been occupying a marginalized position. And unfortunately, a lot of them do precarious work. And work that's dangerous and yet simultaneously deemed essential, work that is not compensated properly. And all of these struggles are interconnected, right? Like the struggles of immigrants are inextricably linked to the struggles of working class people. The struggles of working class people are inextricably linked to struggles of racial justice, of you know, of the struggles of the larger social movement that sort of bend toward that arc of justice. You can't just get justice for some folks. That's just not how it works, right? So we're in a unique time right now where, you know, the system that we've existed in is failing the vast majority of us. Not just some of us, but we're starting to understand, I think, how deeply interconnected and inextricably linked these struggles are, and why, just like people have to coordinate actions across companies to have broad-reaching solidarity, we're also in a position where people need to be interconnecting struggles in a way to build broad power of marginalized people to fight back and build something that works for everybody and not just for a handful of people.
Danny, what's your take about how these struggles intersect and blossom out from one another? You know, being in the Bay Area that has a long history of radicalized movements. Obviously, I'm thinking of the Black Panthers, my favorite. But obviously, other organizations and other movements have built upon what was laid by the people before them. And I'm curious as to what that looks like from your vantage point out there in Oakland.
A lot of collateral damage is what it looks like the last few years. And the struggle and the response, from my vantage point specifically, you know, I'm part of a loose network of a couple thousand folks who work in tech. in different ways. Some people work at university IT. Some people are working in like a bioscience lab. Some of us are doing coding or other things for the usual suspects, and it takes a lot of learning. One of the things we do a lot of is try to learn from local history, right? And from history around the world. I think I'll share just a quick one that you might know. And this is not really, it's not really believable, but it happened, right? There was a factory in Italy that we learned about from in the 70s, I want to say, where all these engineers who were, it's a chemical plant. All the engineers said, this is a bad place to work. And they just systematically took the factory apart, And we think about it, a lot of these companies are too big to fail or whatever, too big to replace. But like, that's just software, right? And logistics. And I love that story about in Italy, I think it was in Milan, where they took apart a literal chemical plant that could have exploded and killed lots of people in the area. It was already slowly killing people. So this, learning from history and being in relationship with each other today to see what we are all experiencing. And I think to your point a minute ago of really appreciating what we want to live in, I've been in Oakland 11 years now, and I really invest myself in living here. Part of what makes me want to be in this thing, in the struggle, in this conversation with you all, right, is having a positive vision of what it would look like ahead of time, not just like, oh, can we kind of get by week to week, but like, what kind of place we want to live in for the long term.
Absolutely. And, we have a video here about something really, just a piece. Okay. Instacart workers have been having to get creative, along with Walmart workers as well. And I'm not sure if you guys have heard about this or not, but and this is from commondreams.org. A national labor nonprofit has created this tracking software to help track coronavirus through in Walmart stores, because the company was not being forthcoming about how many employees were infected and who was getting called, who was calling out sick because of coronavirus. So United for Respect helped craft this app or this technology, this tracking software, to help monitor the spread of the virus throughout Walmart stores. And really, this was a case of Walmart employees having to protect and defend themselves because they can't rely on their companies to be honest when it comes to issues of health and possibly life and death. As we look ahead and trying to figure out what the workplace and the work environment and what working conditions are going to look like as we hopefully move out of this pandemic and shift to what a new normal is, I'd like to ask all three of you, in your opinion, what should the new normal look like? What should the workplace be? Because we are a generation, possibly two, behind on wages matching inflation and the cost of living. And people are discovering, and I don't think they're discovering, actually, I think they've known for some time that this is unsustainable. And Chris, I want to start with you. What should the new normal look like?
Absolutely. Well, this is the 20th century. We got to adapt to this society.
21st, baby.
21st. Yeah, you're right. 21st. 21st. I'm sorry. I said the 20th.
You good.
We have to adapt. A lot of the civil rights laws that are covered in this country obviously don't work for us anymore. And this is an example of what we're going through now. Us standing up for our rights now, employee rights, is because the system that's in place is not working. We need some type of organization. I don't want to keep saying union, because some of the unions are also, flawed as well. I do support them though. Some of the majority of them do take care of their employees. They stand up for the right causes, but they're different in different communities. What's happening on the East Coast is different from the West Coast. So maybe a rank and file committee ran by employees that meet all demands that benefit the employees, some type of democracy that the employees can control for these major corporations That's something that is that could be a solution to what we're going through now. That's what I believe will work for, for example, for Amazon alone. This workforce that we have, I don't think one specific union can control that. It's a large workforce, over 500, almost 600,000 employees nationwide. Talking about 800, possibly a million employees worldwide. I don't think that one organization can control that. What I do think, a rank and file committee by regions, even by countries, can be a solution to control the demands that we're asking for now. I believe that the employees should have more of the power that we don't have now. These CEOs, they have all the power in the world. They take it and give it, and enough is enough. And I believe that right now you're starting to see the shift towards a rank and file committee or a coalition that can be built for frontliners.
Vanessa, a lot of people look at gig jobs as your extra job, your side job, but it is a full-time job for a lot of people for a variety of reasons. People enjoy the flexibility. Not everybody wants to work in an office. I don't fault people for that at all. But in your opinion, what does the future of the gig economy, what should it look like in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, short of the workers seizing the means of production and outright just owning that, I would say that the kind of intermediary reforms that we need to see, the number one is we need to be properly classified. We've made some headway in the state of California, but unfortunately, we don't have federal protections that are strong for misclassification. Misclassification sort of greenlights these companies to run amok and fail to protect workers and claim no responsibility and pass on their operating costs to workers who can afford it the least. So we need a federal version, the PRO Act, of a law that we have here in California called AB 5. But the law is only as strong as the enforcement. So we need enforcement of broad sweeping labor reform. I think we also need to have representation, as Chris was saying. Every single company, regardless of the industry, the sector, et cetera, workers need to have a say in the decisions that those companies make. I'm a strong believer in unionization. Like I wish I could federally unionize right now. Unfortunately, the federal government views me as my own independent business. The reality is whether that's through a union or a coalition or a collective of workers that have, bargaining power, negotiating power, and are representative of the needs of workers, that's something that we need throughout all industries and sectors in our society. It's obvious when it's warehouse workers. It's probably even obvious when it's gig workers. I think Danny can speak to it more, but it's also so necessary for tech workers, even people who have, a good income with, fair work conditions and aren't exposed to a lot of inherent health risks in their work. They need to have ownership over what the companies do with their labor, because right now a lot of those companies are contracting out to ICE. A lot of those companies are contracting out to local PD departments, right? A lot of those companies are contracting out to the military and doing things with the product of their labor that they don't co-sign. And workers need to have representation across industry, across sectors for that very reason, so that we can control what companies are doing with the product of our labor and the profit of our labor as well. And we need to engage in a much, much, much larger share of that profit.
Danny, if you could expound upon some of the things Vanessa was talking about, by all means, as it is relevant to your sector.
I just remembered don't know, I think it was in 2017. Time moves so fast, but there was an engineer at Uber named Joseph Thomas, I think. And he had a great job and he had a couple of kids. He was living up in the northeast part of the Bay, and like black guy, 33, 34, maybe, and he was so stressed and so overworked and so abused by his management. And, for like a week, people were talking about this guy because he took his own life. And I just remembered it now, right? Because Vanessa is describing how there's like bad conditions cut across up and down, left and right, all different parts of the system that these companies kind of insert themselves in, including this guy, Joseph Thomas. And he's no longer with us, And I think having representation, there's talk about having a voice, but it's like having power, having decision-making power. There are examples in the US, a few. There's a group in New York called Up and Go that's a platform of cleaning businesses owned by women. They own the intellectual property. They own the whole thing, They make all the decisions on pricing and how much money they take in, and they get 95% of the income from these cleaning jobs they do, right? And they're beating other gig work companies out in New York like them. But also just having workers on the board, right? Like that is not a big deal in a lot of other countries. America's so good and right in a lot of ways, and so awful and like such a limited imagination. We don't even like consider some of these things that are happening right here, or like pretty bland and normal everyday stuff in other countries too. So that's real stuff that I think we can leverage, and build more cooperative alternatives and more worker power that is we should romanticize it, but we should also make it really normal at some point. That's kind of how I have two minds about it.
Well, obviously, all of these issues are part of an ongoing, not only just conversation, but movement. And I feel as if though the pandemic has really struck about a very unique opportunity. Obviously, we are tremendously saddened and heartbroken by the over 60,000 people that have succumbed to COVID-19 here in the United States, and of course, the many other thousands around the world. At the same time, I feel as though this is a time of empowerment where people feel more emboldened to step up and speak out and reach out and take, if necessary, the things that we know that have been owed to us, because we have been paying into the system for generations, and the people before us have been paying into the system, and a very small amount appear to be enriched and to appear to be thriving. But the bill is due now, babies. It's time to write that check, and it's time for us to cash it. Listen, gang, coming up tonight at 7:00 in just over an hour, the premiere of our documentary here on The Real News about Freddie Gray 5 years later. Let's have a look.
I have to say that the killing of Freddie Gray was not right. I mean, I miss him so much.
So many people there at his funeral. I was glad that he had so much of love and support.
It really was a watershed moment. Baltimore has a long history of uprisings, of rioting, of people pushing back, of racial conflict in many ways. The culmination of not only the long arc of Baltimore's history playing itself out repeatedly, but also the Black Lives Matter movement with the non-indictments of the officers that killed Mike Brown in Ferguson, the officers that killed Eric Gardner in New York.
400 years of resentment built up in folks, and everybody, every community, every person has a breaking point.
Police the police because they cannot police themselves.
Freddie Gray 5 years later premieres tonight right here on the Real News YouTube channel, 7:00 p.m. Don't miss it. I believe, Dwayne, tell me in my ear, is there going to be a discussion afterwards? A live Q&A afterward with Mark Steiner. So be sure, do not miss that. We are looking forward to that. We want to see you here. Well, gang, it's May Day, and May Day will go on, not just today, but as we go along for the rest of 2020. I feel as though that there is a match that has been lit, a torch has been struck, and people are ready to take what we deserve. So I'd like to thank our fantastic panel for joining us today. Chris Smalls, Vanessa Bain, Danny Spitzberg, Gang, you guys are fantastic. We stand with you in solidarity in all of your efforts and actions. And please don't hesitate to come back and share with us anything that you all want to talk about as it relates to making sure that workers get what they deserve. You are always welcome here. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having us.
Solidarity.
Thank you. Solidarity.
Solidarity.
In solidarity with you all, I'm Kim Brown. Thank you guys so much for checking out Stir Crazy. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.